4. Chapter 5, I guess it's still Peter a little bit. It's Ananias and Sapphira there. Chapter 6 goes to the broader areas of the church as a whole. And it really just moves around. And then it goes to Stephen and Philip and then Paul. And chapter 10, though, is about Peter, and it's about God making a new move Hold on a minute. Something's goofy with my Facebook. Maybe it's up. Okay, cool. Never mind. So chapter 10 is about Peter and God. It's about God making a new move to a new people group, the Gentiles, through Peter. Okay? So Peter is having a vision. We looked at him yesterday in chapter 9. He has these healings. Aeneas, who is paralyzed, and then Tabitha, also called Dorcas, who died, who raises from the dead. And in chapter 10, he's in this city called Joppa, which is near the Mediterranean Sea. And there's this guy, Cornelius, who's a Gentile. He's a centurion. I mean, he's a Roman leader in the Roman army. And Peter he's a Gentile, but he says he's a godly man. We're going to spend a couple days here in chapter 10, so I'm just giving you a summary of it right now. It says he's a godly man. He prays. He gives money. He's just a good guy, apparently. But he doesn't know Jesus, and he's not Jewish. He's not part of God's people. It's a Gentile is just anybody who's not Jewish. That's how the Bible describes a Gentile. So he wants to know God. Peter, meanwhile, is in Joppa, and he's praying, and he has a vision, and God lowers this sheet down. I'll read this for you here. The next day, as they were on their journey approaching the city, Peter went up to the housetop about the 6th hour. That's about lunchtime. Okay, to pray. He became hungry, wanted something to eat, and while they were preparing it, he fell into a trance. He saw the heavens open and something like a great sheet descending, being let down by its four corners upon the earth. In it were all kinds of animals and reptiles and birds of the air, and there came a voice to him, "Rise up, Peter, kill and eat." I guess he's really hungry. But Peter said, "By no means, Lord. I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean." He's Jewish. Remember, there's all kinds of rules about what you're not allowed to eat. He says, I've never eaten any of those things. So no. The voice came to him a second time. "What God has made clean, do not call common or unclean." Okay? This happened 3 times, and the thing was taken up at once to heaven. Peter's inwardly perplexed, it says, and then Cornelius' servants come knocking on the door saying, "Hey, can Peter come over? We need to talk about God." And he goes there and he prays, and they receive Christ, they receive the Holy Spirit, and it's this big deal because now the Gentiles have met Jesus through Peter, through the head of the church, the leader of the disciples at this point. And now the Gentiles are getting it, and it's through Peter. And so that's the big overview of this chapter. But to us, it kind of sounds simple. Well, of course, why wouldn't he go to these people? Why not tell them about Jesus? Why would he avoid that? What's the big deal? The big deal is because God has always marked off the Jews, Israel, as his chosen people, and everything that happened, everything we know about the true God came through the Jews, through Israel. That was Abraham, that was Moses, David, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, all the prophets, all of it. Jesus was Jewish. He was born of a descendant of David, right? So the whole way down, it's always been Israel. And they were taught, don't marry into the Gentiles. Don't marry a Gentile. Don't let your kids marry Gentiles. Don't ever do it. Don't worship the gods they worship. Don't eat the foods they eat. There's clothes they have to wear. Don't do any of it. Don't associate. You are my chosen people. You are to be kept separate. You're not to intermix with these other people groups. And you read your book of Joshua, and it's just kind of astonishing and scary. They have to go city to city, and they wipe them out. They kill them, or they chase them far away, never to come back. And all through the Old Testament, every time Israel falls into some kind of sin, it's always because of a foreign influence, because of somebody, some nation, some person somehow influencing them away from their Jewishness and into the Gentile world and acting like all of that. And so Peter's not, and Peter's a faithful man. He's followed Jesus this whole time. He's faithful. He's never eaten an unclean food. All these laws about what's kosher and not kosher, and he's never done that. And he tells God, I've never done that. 3 times he sees this vision. And then knock, knock, knock on the door. Some Gentiles want to talk to Peter. And he goes to their house. And this would have been a big deal. And it is a big deal. The rest of the New Testament, this kind of stuff is a big deal. We'll get to chapter 15, but they have a whole meeting to figure out, what do we do with Gentiles? Are they allowed to do this stuff? And maybe they should become Jewish first, and then they can meet Jesus, because this was mind-blowing. The entire book of Romans and the book of Galatians were written about this issue. It was a major issue, and it still is to some degree, although not necessarily in modern America. But if you're a Christian who is trying to share the gospel with somebody who is Jewish, but you're a Gentile, and you're going to tell them about Jesus who was Jewish, you're going to bump into some major questions. You absolutely are, and the New Testament accounts for that, and this is how it was. Now, what does it apply to me and you? I'm going to assume that most of you watching are not Jewish. I'm going to assume most of you are Gentiles. I assume that because just by the numbers, the statistics and stuff, the odds are good in that. And most of my church, of course, is a Gentile church. Not on purpose, just the way it is, of course. So I assume that you're a Gentile. And so you might not necessarily say, how does this apply to me? I am allowed to learn about Jesus. I don't have to become Jewish first. That score's been settled. That issue is dealt with. I read my book of Romans. I read my Acts chapter 15, my Acts chapter 10. I'm a Christian. I'm not worried about it, right? Well, let's think of it in a different category. Modern America this country has been built on this idea of liberty and equality, and we're all equal and we're all the same. We have the same rights, and discrimination and disliking somebody because of where they're from is just frowned upon. I mean, it's bad. We don't do that here. We're not supposed to. When it does appear, when it flares up in the news or something, it is universally condemned across the country. Nobody supports that kind of stuff. So, how do we apply this? I think it's pretty simple. Stop thinking in terms of people groups and just start thinking about people, individual people. Because what God does here in chapter 10 of Acts is he essentially says, stop thinking about categories. Stop thinking about groups. What I have created, don't call it unclean. What I have made is mine. It's my creation, he's saying. So there are people in your life who you find annoying, right? I assume. There are people in your life you might even find repulsive, just that disgust you. Or maybe they're not even in your life, but when you're out in public somewhere, you look around and you might have a tendency to just kind of judge people by their appearance or by the words that come out their mouth, the way they act, whatever. You see a person and you just think, ugh, that guy, that lady, man, that's a mess, right? I'm not saying you should do that. I think we would all say, I shouldn't be judging people based on how they look and how they stuff like that. But there's mean people, there's nasty people in the world. There's people that can't talk without dropping curse words. There's people that just for whatever reason drive you nuts, and you clash like opposite magnets. Just you cannot have any connection there. It's repulsive to you, right? Well, I have something to share. we don't want to be like that. I know none of you are proud of that, and none of us would ever be, try to justify those kinds of attitudes and things we get. But when you meet the worst person in the world, like when you meet somebody that just repulses you, you are meeting someone who's made an image of God. You're actually closer to God when you are with another person, just in the room with them, talking to them, seeing them. That's the image of God. And it's kind of weird to think about it, but that is the closest to seeing God in the flesh as you're going to get in this life, is other people made in the image of God. Okay? The nastiest, worst, grossest, rudest, obnoxious person you ever meet is the image of God on display. Okay? Now, I'm not saying that nastiness is like reflects on who God is. It's if there's sin, if there's anything bad, that reflects on the sinful nature corrupting the image of God. So I'm not saying that ugliness is God or something like that. I'm just saying that the people you meet are made in the image of God. That image has been corrupted in you, just like them, and in me, and everybody else. It's corrupted, and that corruption of the image of God makes repulsive things happen. It makes bad words come out of our mouths. It makes bad habits and laziness and all kinds of whatever it is that annoys you. That comes from the corruption of sin. But the person that you're meeting and talking to and around, that person is going to live for eternity. They might live for eternity in heaven. They might live for eternity in hell, but they are eternal. They have the weight of God's glory built into them. And so do you, so do I, all of us do. And so we have, there's no room then. There's no room for judging. There's no room for holding it against them the way they act or something. Like, God is the judge. They're made in his image, not yours, not mine. They're made in his image, so if they've corrupted his image with sin or something, that's God's deal to judge. That's it. Do not call common, do not call unclean what I have made. Okay, that's what he says. Chapter 10, verse 15. The voice came to him a second time, what God has made clean, do not call unclean, do not call common. This happened 3 times, the thing was taken to heaven. What I have made clean, do not call common. If God made you, and you did, God made that guy down the road too. God made that annoying person that you don't like also. What God has made clean, do not call unclean. The way you think about people, the way you talk about people, the way you think and judge and interact with people is the way you feel about God. Okay? They're the image of God. They're the closest you're going to see in the flesh. I mean, unless you see, get a vision of Jesus or something. I know that happens, but that's pretty rare. Most people don't see it, and most people who do have those visions don't have them every day. You probably interact with and see 50 people every single day. Or I don't know, if you're a stay-home family or something, you might only see 5 or 6 or whatever. But you see people every day, all day, and you think about people all the time. And the way you think about them and the way you treat them and the way you act around them reflects on how you feel about God directly, because they're the image of God. They're the reflection of God. And so are you. And so what God has made clean, do not call unclean. All right? It's kind of heavy. Like, I'm not trying to make us all sound like we're horrible people that just judge everybody everywhere we go. But if I'm honest, I know that's a temptation for me. I know that there are people that just drive me nuts. And there are people that I overhear something in Walmart or whatever, and I just automatically respond in my heart with a kind of judgment, a kind of just dislike. I can't believe she's saying that to her kid right in front of her kid. Like, I don't know. I just get all judgment. And sure, sin is sin. I'm not saying that stuff's good, but it's a person. They need Jesus. If they repulse you and annoy you, maybe they need Jesus even more. All right? Sick people need a doctor. That's what Jesus would say. He looked at these people with compassion. So let's do the same. Peter had to have a wake-up call. He was born and raised, his entire heritage, his entire family line going back thousands of years said, stay away from these guys. This is a centurion. He's a Roman centurion. He's an occupier. He's an oppressor. He's a bad guy, and he's a Gentile. No way am I going to that guy's house. Not a chance. I wouldn't do that. I'm a faithful, good, godly man. I'm never going to be seen in that guy's house. And God says, do it. What I have called clean, do not call unclean. Do not get into that. He's God. He wants to reach everybody. He wants you to reach everybody. And he'll put them in your path, and he wants you to reach them with love, with kindness, in their house, wherever. Okay? It's kind of heavy, but it's true. And I think it was probably even harder for Peter to hear. God himself had to say it 3 times to Peter before Peter even started thinking about it. Right? So let's resolve to treat one another the way we would treat God, because the people in your life are the image of God. That's the closest you'll see. All right? Praise the Lord. God bless you. Stay tuned. Every day at noon I post these up. We just go straight through, except Sundays. Sundays, it's the sermon is also based out of the book of Acts here too. So this is a good way to go in depth with it. If you're reading along with Acts and you want to tune into these videos, maybe I give you additional stuff to think about. If you have additional things to think about, go post them in the comments. Hey, did you think about this, Pastor? There's more to this. Tell a story about how this applies in your own life or whatever. I believe this is meant to be read. I believe it's meant to be thought about. I believe it's meant to be talked about. I believe it's meant to be lived out as well. So glory to God. Stay tuned. I'll see you tomorrow right here at